All right, I think that's our cue to get started. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for this presentation. I'm really excited to see you all today. I'm not sure exactly if someone else is going to be admitting folks. Yes, okay, from the waiting room. So there we go. My name is Laura Brown, and I am a community and economic development educator with the University of Connecticut Extension. Glad to see some familiar faces in the room tonight. And I'm so excited to have three presenters on board with us tonight for this session on trails and green spaces as connectors, connecting communities with walking and cycling trails. And our presenters tonight, just to give you a quick overview, are Neva Taylor, and she is a UConn student, graduate, and has worked with the On the Trail and Walk With Me podcast, among other things. Raul is Irizarry, the Connecticut program manager for the Trust for Public Land and Bridgeport Waterfront project. You guys can wave if you want. And Bethany, who is the Planning and Community Development Director at the town of East Longmeadow in Massachusetts. So really glad to be welcoming some folks from out of state as well. Just so you know, I'm coming to you from Quinnipiac, Wappinger, and Paugussett land here in New Haven, Connecticut. And I welcome you all to acknowledge the lands in which you're coming from tonight so that we know where we are. We will have about 20 minutes each for our presenters, and then we'll open it up for questions after that. So I think we're good to go. We have a colleague, Jennifer, I think, who's going to be monitoring the chat box. So Jennifer, if you could, I guess I'll monitor. Yes, awesome. I'll monitor that as well, and we'll pose urgent questions to our presenters after they're done. But otherwise, like I said, we will have a time for Q&A after the three presentations. So Neva is our first presenter. Neva, thank you so much.
Awesome. And I apologize, I'm a little under the weather. So I do not always sound like this. So today I'm going to be talking about the nature gap and environmental racism and how people can fight to expand equity in the outdoors through storytelling and other community measures. And a quick note, I don't know who I should be saying this to, but is there any way to turn off the doorbell noise as people enter? Maybe.
I'll look and see if I can do that, but I think that was a setting made.
Okay, that's totally fine.
The meeting. Yep.
Just wanted to know. So again, as Laura said, I am a UConn senior. I actually have 4 weeks left in school, so I'm very close to being done. And in June of 2020, I joined the CT Trail Census team as an intern, and my role kind of very quickly turned from, I guess, an average summer intern into this kind of podcast host. We originally started a podcast as a way to do community outreach and kind of just inform about trail-related issues. But after the George Floyd murder and the subsequent protests, we thought it was very applicable and necessary to really highlight the POC voices in Connecticut, because it's not that they're not there, you know, it's more just that we need to listen and highlight them. So oftentimes my interviews, you know, didn't really follow a script and were a lot more about kind of giving my interviewees a platform to kind of talk about what they have seen in their own neighborhoods and communities. I think that oftentimes we can get a little too stuck in I guess, listening to what like the big top 3 issues that maybe the news has decided are most pressing, or you know, just press our own beliefs upon what needs are most pressing, but it's obviously best to just ask. So again, this podcast kind of brought up some of the things within, you know, Connecticut communities and spaces that were really pressing. And that included a lot of calls for increased education, and increased education meaning that a lot of people don't truly understand outdoor inequities because it's not a large part of the grander like DEI social justice conversation. but the outdoor space, just like any other space, has inequities. It's important to kind of highlight them and make sure that we understand our part in them and how we can kind of be a part of the solution. So people I interviewed included artists, bicycle enthusiasts, outdoor educators, UConn students, people working with sustainability, community activists. Our other panelist, Raul, was one of my interviewees. Thank you again. And these are even though I have since ended being the host of the podcast episodes are still up and available for anyone to listen to at their own pleasure on Spotify. So you can actually just search On the Trail if you want to listen to any of them. They all have little descriptions of what each one talks about. So if you have a personal interest, feel free to go ahead and do that. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about kind of this increased education and how we can do that in a couple ways through being members of our own communities. I think it's important to think about what we can do on a personal level and not get too bogged down in like systematic change, which is incredibly important, but also like as a normal Connecticut citizen, there are very small things that we can do to make a difference as well. So I wanted to start off by giving everyone an opportunity to just think about the last time that they were in an outdoor space themselves and what that outdoor space looked like. And when I say like, what did that outdoor space look like? I'm talking about what kind of people were you with? Who did you see? Was it, predominantly children? Was it predominantly white? Were many people older? Like, what were the demographics that you noticed in your outdoor space? So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity real quick just to enter into the chat anything that they may have noticed in a recent outdoor experience. And maybe, again, like if you're from Connecticut or anywhere else, maybe where that experience was.
Neva, could you repeat the question for the chat again? I'll put it in the chat box for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a recent outdoor experience that you had and what the demographics of people around you were. And I guess where you were in Connecticut, if you are from Connecticut. Yeah, okay. So I'm starting to see younger people, white, predominantly white, all ages, mostly white, predominantly older, diverse, younger. Yeah, so there are certain things, right, that we can assume based on the outdoor space that we are in. For example, if you're at a national park and you're on a relatively hard hiking trail, you might see a lot more younger people and a lot less older people, right? But one of the things that I think we can say across the board in outdoor spaces is that outdoor spaces are predominantly white. And that is not because people of color do not want to be in those white spaces, right? But it's often an issue of accessibility and equity. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of my time. And I thank everyone for putting in their thoughts. So I'm going to be talking about something called a nature gap. And I think that that's not something that a lot of people hear, but I think it's a good word to kind of encompass what we're talking about when we're talking about this like issue of accessibility or inclusion. And so the Center for American Progress defines it as this idea that American society distributes nature's benefits and the effects of its destruction and decline unequally by race, income, and age, right? So this idea that the benefits of nature, all of the physical and mental benefits that we receive are unequally given by race, income, and age. And then on the flip side of that, the destruction of nature, which some of us may know as like environmental racism or injustice, are also on the flip side unequally affecting people by their race, income, and age. So something that I like to think about when kind of thinking about this nature gap is national parks, just because we have a lot of statistics about who is visiting national parks. And so I wanted people, again, to go into the chat real quick and try to think of some barriers for people of color and people of lower socioeconomic statuses for why they possibly are not equally represented in the demographics of people who are visiting national parks. Yeah, so Steph talked about access to transportation, which is huge. Yep, transportation again, huge. Thankfully, we're at this multimodal summit and all we talk about is transportation. Transportation, time, money, information. Yes, all of these things are super important. I think that sometimes because we have grown up with certain accesses to things like as simple as cars, right? Most national parks, actually, I don't think, well, I won't say all, but for the most part, national parks, you need a car to get to them. There is not a lot of public transportation to parks. And therefore, a lot of people can't access them. Also, a lot of national parks involve fees, right? You can't get through the gates if you can't pay $20 or however much it is. So on top of needing a car, you also need to pay a fee. And again, these are barriers for people to access these parks, which again, is an outdoor space, right? Which is kind of counterintuitive because we think that like, you know, everyone is able to step outdoors, but some of these specific outdoor spaces that we think about are actually, there are tons of barriers for getting people into them. So I wanted to share some statistics about national parks. And according to a survey, 78% of those who visited federal parks are white. Meanwhile, African Americans, Latinos, women, and members of the LGBTQ community often report feeling unwelcome or unsafe in these outdoor spaces. Moreover, the outdoors industry workforce, which includes everyone from park rangers to retail sales associates, have minimal representation from these groups. So another thing that I'll be talking about is the importance of representation, right? Because again, it's on top of feeling unwelcome, even if all of the barriers were erased. If you don't see anyone that looks like you or that you think you can relate to, it's hard to convince yourself to go into these spaces. So my next stat says that participation and attendance at state and national parks, as well as forested areas, tends to be disproportionate between white people and people of color. The reasons behind this go beyond the fact that people of color are 3 times more likely than white people to live in places that have no immediate access to nature. So again, we talk about transportation as being a huge barrier to getting to these outdoor spaces. And my last stat says that people of color tend to have higher unemployment rates and lower income levels, leading to less disposable income to take trips for outdoor recreation. If you are low income and you don't necessarily have vacation time to take trips to state and national parks, then how are you going to be able to access them? And I think that this last stat is important because we are not saying that people of color are the only people who experience unemployment, but due to systematic racism, right? We know that there is a disproportionate amount of people of color experiencing unemployment. So it's important to recognize the systematic racism that affects this environmental injustice, because at the end of the day, it's all connected. So what is environmental racism? According to, so environmental racism, I'm sorry, is the idea that people of color and people of are disproportionately likely to be in these kind of dangerous for both mental and physical health situations. That means, you know, they're closer to factories, they're closer to pollution. You can read the stats over here on the infograph. if you want more, but I think what's important to really zone in on is on the right-hand side of the screen, where I talk about how the DEEP has recognized 5 major metropolitan towns in Connecticut, which are Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, and Waterbury. And combined, these towns have 19% of the state's population, or sorry, 19% of the state's pollution, 20% of all potential pollution sources, and 51% of all the state's population in poverty. And again, at the bottom, 71% of the state's minority population. So again, this is very concentrated and very recognizable in Connecticut specifically. And so again, we can see these in our communities and we can ask these questions, because there should be no reason, right, that 19% of the state's pollution is directly tangential with the fact that 71% of the state's minority population live in these areas. So when we think about communities and storytelling and outreach and what can we do, I think that the number one thing I want to highlight is that storytelling is a way to increase knowledge. So whether, it's my podcast or anything as small as word of mouth, it's really important that we spread the word, and even if we feel like we are not experts, it's as small as, sharing a link, sharing an article, but again, constantly making sure that we are reaching out to our communities and making sure that we are increasing education around these issues. Because as I said, if no one knows that they have a local trail 5 minutes from their house, how would they know to utilize it, right? Like, it doesn't have to be on a large scale kind of thing. Second, education and action. It's important that more and more people focus, react, and respond to the inequalities in our outdoor spaces. If you learn about a problem, you should work to be a part of the solution. And it doesn't have to be big. This could just mean expanding your bike group, looking at the people that you usually go into outdoor spaces with, and maybe thinking like, oh, let's invite someone new. And again, this can also be on the policy side, which includes, making sure that you're electing people who understand the importance of environmental justice and equity. And lastly, I think it's important to understand the generational impact of storytelling and outreach. Oftentimes we are focused on this younger next generation, but part of the reason that many communities feel unwelcome in spaces is because, their parents felt unwelcome and their grandparents felt unwelcome. So it's important to make sure that we're sharing these stories, not just to the next generation, but their parents and grandparents, so that the entire neighborhood, the entire community feels welcome. And that is more or less my presentation, and I am open to questions.
Thank you so much, Neva. That was such a nice way to kind of lay the groundwork for the overall framework of this, our presentations today. And as Bethany gets her slides prepared, we can entertain some questions in the chat if anyone has any for Neva. All right, so Bethany, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and share. Oh, sorry. Did I have Raul next? Oh, I apologize. Raul, you can go ahead and share your slides if
all good, all good.
I was looking at the wrong list.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sounds
okay,
great.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, Neva, thank you so much for that. I think that set up really a lot of what I'm about to talk about in Bridgeport and the waterfront stuff that really we got going on there. So just give me a minute to share my screen here so I can just share my slides and a story map that we have here. Can you see that there? All right, cool. So before I go into Bridgeport's waterfront, just to give you a little background on myself and really TPL, the Trust for Public Land, and what we do. I am the Connecticut program, Parks for People program manager at the Trust for Public Land. If you had to take anything away from you today about the Trust for Public Land, it's literally just we build parks for people. And our thing is just trying to have a 10-minute walk to a green space or open space for everyone in the nation. So we're a national nonprofit and working right now in about 33 states, but I am specific to Connecticut. So, and I'm super excited about what's going on in Bridgeport. The Trust for Public Land has been working in Bridgeport for quite a while now in different ways. So started back in 2009, but on the waterfront specifically, we've been working on that since 2017. Shortly after the city of Bridgeport came up with this waterfront master plan and what they want to do on the waterfront and what their big kind of plans are, we were involved in that effort. And then we continued really on just talking to the community and convening them about how they wanted to pursue implementing the waterfront and how they wanted that to look. So now we are here today in Bridgeport's waterfront. So I can start going in a little bit about that. And before I go into the story map, just to give you kind of orientation here, this is this whole kind of these lines, you see the green dots, the solid blue, the dotted blue lines. This is this envisioned waterfront pathway that came out of that waterfront master plan. And this has been the focus of what we do with the Trust for Public Land in Bridgeport and what we've been working on. The solid blue lines are what has been completed. The dotted blue lines are what's coming up and planned, and then the green dotted lines are something that's going to happen far into the future. So this pathway in itself, it's over 20 miles long and it goes through 9 neighborhoods. So this is a huge project, and it's going to be multiple years and probably multiple decades to get this thing done, to get it to the level that everybody wants it to be, to have a really nice, just accessible waterfront. So again, over 20 miles. This map here is just to give you a bit of orientation. If you're familiar with Bridgeport, if I have any Bridgeport folks here, downtown is kind of this area here. And Seaside Park, if you haven't been there, please go check it out. It's a beautiful, amazing park. They have an amazing pathway that you can walk through, really, and it goes the entire kind of waterway here. So please check it out if you can. Big Seaside Park fan. All right, and here we go. Just a couple of quotes to just start off. So Bridgeport has a unique waterfront because of the way it winds up into our neighborhoods, and if we follow it, into the lives of people who live here. I think that quote kind of ties in really this theme of connecting and connection through green spaces, right? Again, the Bridgeport waterfront pathway is going to go through 9 of the 13 neighborhoods in Bridgeport. Again, give you a little more orientation. Bridgeport is located on the northern shore of the Long Island Sound. And it's, the city considers the waterfront to be one of its greatest assets, with having around 24 miles of that waterfront. This one, I think, is one of the most important things here. Even though Bridgeport is home to 45 public parks and open spaces, 70% of the land is currently inaccessible along the waterfront. So what that means is that 30% of the land is publicly owned. So that's what we're working with to start off as we start to build more access for folks within the city. So we're just reimagining the pathway, and I'll show you some things that we're doing on the ground as well after this. But so again, from that waterfront master plan, there came this vision of a 20+ mile waterfront pathway. Let's get to some of the good stuff here. So 30% of residents in Bridgeport currently lack access to a high quality park within a 10-minute walk from home. And, what we do, we want to be able to close that gap right now. In comparison to other Connecticut, like CT cities, Hartford and New Haven are above the 90% access, actually 97%, close to that. But Bridgeport itself is still in the 70% range for being just able to walk to like a park. So this is where the waterfront can help close that gap. See that as a huge opportunity for people to just be able to enjoy recreation, especially on the water, and just have access to green space and to water for folks who live in just a really heavily built environment. So as I mentioned before, some of this pathway is already built. And as you go through this, and I'll leave it in the chat too as I finish up, you can kind of take a fly through Bridgeport's waterfront and see where are those places that currently exist that have a pathway and where they don't. But one of those places is St. Mary's by the Sea. It's a great place. You can go and grab a bite to eat and hang out near the water and head over to really connect to Seaside Park eventually. Seaside Park, which I've mentioned a few times now. It's an amazing Olmsted design park, if anyone's familiar with Frederick Law Olmsted. It's 325 acres of lush lawns, shady glades, and sports fields. Most recently, there's gonna be outdoor concerts next year, which are gonna be pretty cool. Right now they're being done at the amphitheater nearby, but they wanna bring this back out to the park. And the reason why we're so focused on doing like programs and different things in the parks is because we want to give people destinations to go. But if you don't have anywhere to go on this pathway or have a destination you want to get to, you're most likely not going to use it. So that's one of the things that as a group, everyone's currently working on. The city of Bridgeport is doing a really good job on just getting people, more opportunities to just engage with the waterfront by just being outside, right? We just want everybody to get outdoors whenever they possibly can. This is another park, Knowlton Park. Now, as the map changes, you can see you enter into a whole different neighborhood. Knowlton Park is right along the water in a very, very, very heavily industrial area. You can see across the water there. There's like warehouses and all that. So that's what your views are at the moment. But Knowlton Park itself is a park that was a contaminated site and it was capped. And then they created a park and they put a actual like walkway that floats above the water there. So again, this is one of those other destinations that you can get to as you walk to Knowlton, as you walk through the waterfront pathway. Second, these are just some images from the waterfront master plan itself, and just really future plans on how they would love the waterfront to be like. And I think some of the more interesting things, I'll switch over to the PowerPoint so you can see what's currently happening right now and how it is that we actually do the work. So that's a little background on the waterfront pathway. This again, Seaside Park, is it's like the premier park in Bridgeport, and honestly, it's an amazing park, like one of those premier, like just Connecticut, beautiful parks. All right, so how do we get people to really start engaging and knowing like what is this waterfront pathway? It's kind of a brand new concept, right? It was just 4 years ago that this master plan came out and that we started talking about a potential waterfront pathway. So one of the ways we do that is we partner up with folks like REI and obviously the city of Bridgeport to bring like waterfront recreation activities. This year was at Knowlton Park during our Park and Paddle, which was in 2019. There was folks who came to this who had never been in the water before in the neighborhood. They've never been in a kayak. And that's one of the things we also see that is a barrier to just want to be outside and go do these kind of things is like one to like just getting people the ability to do this in whatever way they can. So this was again, like you can see the surroundings, super heavily industrial, but there's people on this Pequannock River kayaking and people, and we had to bring that there for people to enjoy. And the hope is that this is something that could stick around a lot more often. Maybe people can have rentals that they can go with. One of the things we're doing right now with National Park Service, local nonprofit Groundwork Bridgeport, and the UConn School of Landscape Architecture are these design and activation workshops where we're trying to figure out what are some things that we could do within the next 6 months to 2 years around the waterfront to get people excited and start to engage with that. And again, the waterfront pathway is going to be, it's a multi-year, multi-decade effort, and we're in the beginnings of just figuring this out. We're doing a lot of walking. We had site walks with the city of Bridgeport and a lot of good folks who came out. Over 40 folks from different places, the Department of Transportation, other landscape architects, just so they can start thinking about what are we going to do on this waterfront. A lot of good, really awesome community Bridgeport folks who were there as well, who had some amazing ideas on like mobile skating rinks. They had ideas on providing food for people using the waterfront. So there was a lot of good feedback given there. This is, again, one of those sections of the waterfront. This is a publicly accessible area that nobody knows about. And on this walk, we were able to bring people there and tell them, hey, you can, if you wanted to, you can head back here right now and engage with the water. So sometimes it's literally just doing that, where you're just like, come on, let's go together. And I know we can do this here. So here's the access to that. And this was our second workshop where we just started to design and talk with folks who are walking by and who are also part of our design teams. Again, these are for short interventions on the water, 6 months to 2 years. So we can start to build excitement around the waterfront. And so people know that, you know, the waterfront is a place that people can start heading to enjoy as another opportunity to enjoy outside. We have some folks here and our landscape architects and some UConn students who are working on a site called Sliver by the River. That's an opportunity site in the Waterfront Master Plan that we hope to build out in the next few years. Another way we're trying to get people out on the water is through this ground sticker concept, where we're just trying to lay out different loops along the waterfront where people can, one, track how far they're walking, two, engage in surveys to tell us what they want on the waterfront, and just add some sort of kind of beginning identity to what that waterfront pathway is and what it could look like. So this was one of the final ground stickers that youth from Groundwork Bridgeport and our Waterfront Advisory Board put together. And just to give you a little bit of background on them, the Waterfront Advisory Board, anybody can join. It's Bridgeport residents and community stakeholders, business owners, really folks who are just interested in Bridgeport's waterfront. Meet on a monthly basis on the third Thursday of the month. This is one of the efforts that they did with one of the local nonprofits. And again, it's just starting to get people to know that this is a thing here. We want you to engage with the waterfront. And so let's figure this out together. This was me and my team installing the ground stickers over one of the bridges and also along this 3-mile Quantic River loop. And this is Groundwork Bridgeport, one of the local nonprofits there, who just held an intergenerational walk actually about a week and a half ago. So they had over 30 walkers, all different ages, as you can see. They were able to walk the 3-mile loop within the entire 20+ mile waterfront pathway. So while they were walking, they also did some cleaning up, which was nice. And as you can see, there were all ages there, folks from different places. There were artists there who were interested in possibly installing murals in the future. There were folks from downtown who own businesses and who work in downtown who just wanted to see what this loop was about. And then they ended at Sliver by the River, which is, again, a stop along this waterfront pathway that we hope to be one of the linear parks in Bridgeport in the future. Okay. So I'll leave it here as far as just what we're doing on the ground. But again, the goal here is just, we see this as an opportunity to, really mesh the natural and green world with the heavily built environment. Waterfronts right now, while are definitely getting affected by climate change and all this, they're definitely an opportunity to just be able to engage and be more active and recreate within cities. So with that, I'll leave you with that. If you have any questions, you can ask me whatever you need to after our presentations. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Raul. What amazing work you guys are doing in Bridgeport. As we transition to Bethany's presentation, there is a question here in the chat box from Jean Davies. How do you engage the public in the long-term maintenance rather than relying on government? And is there a public friends type group to help with events and sustain the quality of the experience? Oh, Raul, you're muted.
Sorry, I just saw that. No, that's a great question. There's a public group. As I mentioned, they're the Waterfront Advisory Board, who are really made up of people who attend different NRZs, folks who have come to different events and learned about the Waterfront Pathway effort, business owners who are interested in what's going on near their land as well. And through them is how we spread out really all the work that we're doing. They also inform everything that so we don't take on anything that the community doesn't want to do. So they literally tell us, like they just told us for next year, we should focus on health and wellness, and they'd love to do in all the different green spaces that exist on the waterfront, and to provide destinations, maybe yoga at different places, along with other kind of holistic ways to just really be outside and engage in a healthy way. And what was the other part of that question? I'm sorry. There was a public group section, and then the maintenance, right? Yeah. So besides, working with the city, we've started to already, as in the early stages of this project, get folks to really feel ownership of the waterfront. And part of that is them coming out with us there and like literally cleaning things up, like at the Sliver by the River. We had a couple cleanups there. The first day we cleaned up over 1,000 pounds of trash. And we've seen that those folks who've come out to just help with maintaining these spaces come out to all the other events that we do with them, like the walks that we do, the park and paddles and all that. And through that, and through the intergenerational way that this is being approached, everybody really kind of pitches in on, keeping spaces clean. And they just, they now have their eyes towards the waterfront. And I think that just makes a huge difference. Just having people looking there and seeing the waterfront in a different way. So definitely taking that approach on just with maintenance, but ultimately the cities, they have the means to do this stuff usually, and usually the best way to go about it.
Raul, thank you so much. We will have, like I said, a little bit more time for questions at the end of the presentations. So why don't we transition over to Bethany? Whenever you're ready, Bethany, you can get started. And Bethany, you're muted. I don't know.
All right.
Yeah. Just some quick housekeeping while we're waiting. Anyone feel free to add questions or observations to the chat. Maybe we could, Raul, if you have any links to your programs, we could put that in there, and I will put the link to Neva's podcast series in there too. So Bethany, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Bethany Yo. I'm the East Longmeadow Planning and Community Development Director. Today, I'll be talking about regional trail systems as urban-rural connectors. So just a quick look back as far as transportation goes. This is East Longmeadow in Massachusetts. We sit right on the Connecticut state line above Somers, Connecticut and Enfield, Connecticut. East Longmeadow has a rich transportation history. By the late 1700s, East Longmeadow's center began to form radial highways that you see here on the left. This is an infamous rotary, which was highlighted in Ripley's Believe It or Not for being a 7th Street intersection with no traffic lights and remains in this unique form today. East Longmeadow owes its development principally to its valuable quarries of red sandstone discovered in the 1800s. Between the sandstone outcroppings and the railroad connection to Springfield by the late 1800s is when the town was able to form its independence from Longmeadow. The quarry use and the use of the railroad was discontinued by 1971, but the town maintained our agricultural and residential roots, continuing to attract industrial and commercial development. So here is just a map of East Longmeadow on the bottom right-hand side, with the rail line kind of follows this road, which is Shaker Road, up and all the way up to Springfield. And up here is the historical train depot. So just a quick overview of Redstone Rail Trail highlighted in the green. The Redstone Rail Trail is an off-road shared use path for bicycles and pedestrians. It follows the former Armory branch of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. It was completed in September of 2010. It took about, I'd say, over a decade to complete from start to finish. The railroad runs in a general north to south direction from Maple Street to Denslow Road, and it's a total of 1.57 miles. It has convenient access to about 90% of this area's retail establishments, but it goes through a pretty heavily industrial area as well. It's mostly flat and it's suitable for all ability levels. It's accessible from Maple Street with parking available in the municipal parking lot adjacent to the East Longmeadow Library and Town Hall, which is off the map here. So there's center fields here, which is athletics, baseball fields mostly. Then we have our high school up here, and what happens a lot, our kids will walk down the sidewalk and hang out on the rail trail here. We also have the East Longmeadow High School athletic teams who use the trail daily for training runs. We have several crossings with push button activated rectangular rapid flashing warning beacons to assist pedestrians and bicyclists in crossing the road. And so the expansion of the trail north of Maple Street to Pleasant View Senior Center and to Heritage Park, which is one of East Longmeadow's largest park systems, was noticed as a priority on our 2019 Open Space and Recreation Plan. And it's been kind of discussed, but not really talked about until recently, which I'll be talking about more later. So our regional planning agency, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, they collect data on the Redstone Rail Trail and the other major trail systems in the region. And these are some up-to-date information that I was sent over today, actually. You can just see that there's been a pretty constant use of the trail. It really went up in 2020 due to the pandemic and people just trying to get outside in a safe way. And it stayed pretty constant since 2020, as you can see in this graph over here. Something that I've seen, so I've been with the town for about 3 years now in the planning department. And what I've noticed are businesses are starting to move to town with the rail trail in mind. So they are picking sites for their businesses that are either directly on the rail trail or nearby it, or might be on the rail trail if we were to extend the rail trail. And these are a few that come to mind. There are also some really big stakeholders that we work with for anything transportation related, pedestrian friendly related grant applications that we put forward. And you'll also see on the left over here is the historic train depot, which has been fully restored and is now functioning as an ice cream shop. And it's really popular in the community. So kind of going back to what Raul was pointing out, trying to get spaces activated. This is kind of happening in an organic manner. So that's a really huge benefit to what we have going on in East Longmeadow is people are already activating this space on their own accord. And that makes my job a lot easier because it's just a matter of coordinating that effort so that we're more organized. So I'll just go back a little bit to the time frame of discussions around the extension of our rail trail. So it really started for East Longmeadow in February of 2021. So fairly recently, we just got funding for a new master plan for the town. So we had just started our vision sessions with the community in February of 2021. During that vision session, we posted a couple short polls, and one of them had to do with the rail trail. You know, asking, is this something that you would want to do or pursue or envision for the town? And we got a lot of positive feedback. I think it was like 83% of participants wanted to see an extension. So that was all I needed to kind of just start that conversation going. So in March of 2021, we applied for the National Park Service program with Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance Program, and we were awarded that assistance. That's been really critical in helping to move through the steps, as well as providing support for community engagement activities and communication across both municipalities and state lines. Coincidentally, in the same month, the mayor of Enfield, Connecticut reached out to me and conveyed that they would be interested in talking about possibly extending a trail in Enfield, Connecticut to reach up to East Longmeadow's border, our southern border. And that was really weird timing because it was all happening at the same time, but it was also perfect timing because we were ready. So that was a really positive conversation, and we've just been keeping each other in the loop as we both move forward in our different communities. In May of 2021, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was able to bring together a meeting with the Mass Trails team to talk about what kind of the feasibility from their eyes were if we were to try to go for this kind of a regional trail system by extending the Redstone Rail Trail to meet either Enfield, Connecticut, and hopefully Springfield as well. And that was also a really encouraging and positive meeting. They were really excited to see that we had these plans, and it seemed to match up timeline-wise with Enfield, Connecticut, and Springfield as well. It's kind of rare to all be on the same page at the same time, so they were really encouraging, and that was a great, great meeting. In June of 2021, we finally were able to make contact with Springfield. East Longmeadow is so tiny compared to Springfield, so it could be kind of hard to find the right person to have the right conversation with to really figure out where they are in the process. But we were able to make that connection, and essentially we asked them, or we found out that they were proposing to have a trail that would extend about a block and a half away from East Longmeadow's border in the north end of town. So our conversation with them was essentially, would you be willing to extend that, that block and a half more? And if we can extend our rail trail up to that, we could have a connection point and make this just a continuous path through both municipalities. So they were really excited about that possibility. It would be really awesome because their trail right now is proposed to end at a school. And if it was able to cross the municipality line, it would go right by 2 major shopping centers and then go on through a really kind of wooded, marshy area in East Longmeadow and end up right in our town center. So that was really exciting to hear from them and that they would be open to that. It was also opened up some opportunities for collaboration with Springfield, who has like a really robust pedestrian and bicycle advocacy groups, which we don't necessarily have formed yet in East Longmeadow. So we have a lot to learn from our neighbors in Springfield. In August of 2021, we circled back to Enfield, and they had now joined up with East Windsor, Connecticut, both very interested in establishing a trail system that would reach up to Massachusetts. They also had Representative Carol Hall on that call, and she is currently working on trying to get a meeting together with some of the other federal representatives to see how Connecticut can work out a trail system. I'm not sure if that will look like a rail trail necessarily, or if it will just follow lie parallel to the rail line. We'll see how that works out, but we're kind of in the same development point with Enfield of just having those first conversations, seeing where the interest is, and just trying to push where it's naturally going. Whereas Springfield, they have their feasibility study done. They've been doing a ton of community outreach and events. They are well underway with that trail that will reach almost East Longmeadow's border. And then in November of 2021, actually just a couple weeks ago, Springfield's trail committee reached out to me and invited me and anybody else from East Longmeadow to their Springfield community meeting. So that was really just a listen into their community meeting. They went through the history of what rail trails can be for communities, what their new one is proposed to look like and function as, and the opportunities it will bring to the communities it will go through. And then it was interesting to hear the feedback from their own community, the concerns and the questions, because I'm sure East Longmeadow will have similar questions and concerns. So that was another learning point for us. And that's really all I have right now. We're definitely in the beginning phases. It's really cool to be talking with our neighbors and to be trying to extend this trail, which, if successful, would connect a really urban area to a very rural area and would cross the state line, which is not only difficult to do, but I think we'd be the first kind of in the area. And I think East Longmeadow would truly benefit from it. It's one of our major outdoor recreational areas that attracts not only East Longmeadow residents, but our neighboring residents anyway. So really extending that opportunity and connecting with our neighbors is huge and would benefit all of the surrounding communities.
Thank you so much, Bethany. What amazing examples we have so close by of all of this great work that's going on. I have a few questions, one for Bethany, and then we can open that up to any of our panelists to answer. As we were discussing the kind of themes for this panel today, one of the things that came up and that Bethany just mentioned was connections. And I wanted to put that back forth to you, Bethany, to talk a little bit about any challenges or opportunities that have come up related to those connections. For instance, you said, finding the right person in, I think it was Springfield was one of the challenges, but I'd like to put that back to you and then open that same question up to the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I think right now it's all about just connecting people. Those stakeholder businesses that I showed in one of the slides, they actually have been working together on a number of events now, but they were all doing their own separate thing at first. And then I was able to kind of put them in touch with each other, and they've been doing these really awesome community events. So that's just a small example of what you can do when you just put 3 people with a similar vision together in the same room. But I think it's interesting that we can operate so close to these other communities, but never actually interact. So hopefully this will be a turning point where we truly do work with and collaborate extensively.
Thank you. Raul or Neva, did either of you want to comment on that sort of theme of connections? Feel free.
Yeah, I can comment on it quickly. I think really, I think drive home that the need for there to be destinations along really any trails, even just to add to the level of safety, feeling safe when there's more people around you, you feel safer. You also walk more and are willing to walk more and stay around more when there's just different things to do and a dynamic and a variety of things to do. And usually, in my experience, I see that community members, they're already doing like really cool and amazing things. It's just tapping into those and having them be at the front, right? And just give them that opportunity really to put their magic on really, what you're trying to do in this space. So that's been a big help for sure. Just having these things to do on these trails. It's a huge thing.
Neva, did you want to comment on that question? Anything you'd like to?
I mean, I think when it comes to like connections and communities, I mean, kind of what we have all said, but again, just making them accessible and connecting them can be really important. So I think just relationships need to be built and formed on a lot of different levels in order to make sure that the community's needs are being heard, but that it's also being kind of proactively put into construction.
And that actually might be related to this next question that just came into the chat. How have these public opportunities for trails and open space connections been incorporated into transportation planning at the regional level? Are they seen as destinations to transit dependent populations?
I can just start really quickly on Bridgeport stuff. Is that one of the opportunity sites, the Sliver by the River, it's at like a transportation nexus. So like transportation is huge on Bridgeport's waterfront because you can access the pathway through a ferry, which is right next to that sliver. You can access it through Metro North, which is also next to the Sliver by the River. And there's a transportation center along that waterfront pathway next to Sliver by the River, which can get you there by buses. And then lastly, there's, the scooters that they have in the city also. So people can really access, there's a lot of different ways to access this pathway. And the city definitely is interested in improving active transportation and just recently completing a complete streets plan. So that's all part of this as well. And again, I think with trails in general, it's just another way to like move around. So, and that's what transportation is. So I think making sure you have that lens, especially with folks who don't have too much access to vehicles. This is, these are one of the ways that you can get people around safely and nicely.
I guess I'll just tag on to that. In East Longmeadow, our largest population is our senior population. And what we heard a lot from our senior population and participants in our community outreach during the master plan was they wanted more spaces where they could walk without fearing for their footing. And the rail trail really provides that. It's a safe space for them to walk. It's accessible if emergency vehicles need to get in there for anything. And the excitement around extending the rail trail towards Springfield is also that it would go right behind our Council on Aging building. So it would provide almost direct access for our senior population's kind of hub area for a safe walking space. It's also already used. People are already walking on it. It's just an informal kind of dirt path where the railroad used to lie. So people are actively using the space anyway. So this would just be formalizing it really.
Thank you. I wanted to pose another question related to the keynote from today's summit. Salita Reynolds was the keynote this morning, and she's from the city of Los Angeles, and she presented some just amazing, what might seem like kind of smaller scale grassroots efforts that have made huge improvements in pedestrian fatalities and outcomes in some of their transportation areas in Los Angeles. And so I'm really struck by kind of the, these projects that are very grassroots in the community, and the power of kind of trails and green spaces to be those sources of community engagement that can bring people together and help to make improvements. I wonder if anyone would like to talk about some other, Raul, we heard some from you, some other ways that you're bringing together maybe some non-traditional partners to engage around these spaces. Feel free to jump in. Just looking for some examples. I was very struck by some of the specific things that Salita shared with us earlier, but any?
I don't know if it would be non-traditional necessarily, but we do have that 413 business in town. It's a shoe store, but they do also organize road races, and they formed quite a large running club in town. So that's another way that we've been trying to activate the rail trail more and more and get more people on it and excited about the extension. So that's definitely another resource that's not quite the norm for rail trails, and usually it's more bicyclist, I feel like, but the more people we can get excited about it, the better.
TPI was lucky enough to work with a really good local nonprofit, Groundwork Bridgeport, who's been doing a lot of work around walking. When I first started, I started right when the pandemic began. So one of the best ways I got to talk to the community was just to walk with them, make myself available. And I said, hey, take me around your segment of the pathway in your neighborhood so we can talk a bit. And from that, Groundwork Bridgeport also started this Bridgeport Walking Club, and they got over 400 interested residents. They hold things now on a weekly basis. And just by having a consistent group like that, it's allowed even other people who are not just your residents, but people who work within government offices, folks who also run different kind of marketing organizations as well. Funders have gone on these walks and all that. And it's been a really good way to convene everybody in an organic and just very genuine way. And to get that experience of how what the existing experience is on the Bridgeport Waterfront pathway, and then what we're trying to hopefully build out in the future.
I can also say that in terms of, kind of urban green spaces, some interactive elements that I've seen people do include community gardens, because not only are you able to kind of weave in horticulture education specifically for kids, but you're also, getting them out into nature and kind of learning about how you can be a part of providing food for yourself. I've also seen story walks for kids. So again, this idea that you can kind of be educated as you're interacting with nature. So I think these little interactive elements, maybe right off the trail or stuff like that, has been super helpful for families, but also just people in general, in terms of kind of making it, kind of walking that line between like recreation and like physical activity maybe.
Thank you so much. I did want to raise up here that Allison wrote in the chat box. How do you create buy-in with government groups like the local police commission? Our community has struggled with support on this level, which makes the progression of any project difficult. They've been resistant to even participating in a conversation about safety measures for pedestrians and cyclists with simple things like signage, bike lanes on roads already wide enough. Any thoughts about that? It doesn't look like that's directed to anyone in particular, but if anyone would like to comment.
I think that's a really tough one. I haven't come in contact with that personally. East Longmeadow has our complete streets plan, and we're slowly picking away at it. So I think we definitely, or East Longmeadow definitely faced concerns like that and pushback when when the Redstone Rail Trail went in. There was a lot of concern that they would spend all this money and all this effort and nobody would want to use it. And obviously our data shows that that is not the case. Our community says that that is not the case. So, you know, maybe using cases around the world and around the around where you are located that show that people really need this, and it's a huge draw economically as well as just in every other place. People want to live where there's a rail trail, and it's really popular right now.
I guess if I could add anything quick to say on it is specific to like even police being involved, especially on a safety standpoint. I think that for us and the community we're working with, and in my experience, we haven't had to engage with the police too often, especially for anything like thinking about signage and anything to just help create a safer experience for pedestrians. We've just been working directly with the city, and usually they have certain permissions that would allow us to implement certain things, but police are there kind of as a support. But it's been nice too, because you know not everybody trusts the police and they don't want to be out really engaging with them all the time. So you know, usually for people in their experience existing outside, they just haven't had good experiences with police. And again, I think though the city has been a good kind of in between for that. So if you're looking more specifically on getting things like done on the road, I'd probably approach, you know, your municipality first, look at zoning and local laws and stuff like that. And then in the times we have engaged with police, it's been during like community events. Like we have a community schoolyard we've done in the past, and they've done things there and given out free things. And from doing that, they're able to have conversations with folks specific to safety in a non-threatening way, or you know, you're just there engaging in a community event. So.
Thank you so much for that. That sort of reminds me of this theme of resistance, which I'm wondering if either of you have encountered. Unfortunately, Neva had to leave for another engagement, but I just wanted to put that out there if that resonates with either of you, like if you've encountered resistance or how you've dealt with that. And then I did see one other question from staff, and a shout out to staff from National Park Service, who she was mentioned several times, and I know she brought some of you on board. What is something unexpected or surprising that you all have learned while working with your communities? So feel free to jump in with either of those questions.
I guess I can start off. I've only been with the town for about 3 years, but East Longmeadow is interesting that we don't have a large or very active nonprofits. I've struggled to find any to work with, and usually that's something that would be my first move, is to figure out what's already going on. But with that said, there is a lot of very civic-minded people in the community. So part of the struggle is providing a space for them to come to and help organize that those passions that are there just, I don't think people know what direction to move in. We're just unorganized in general. So part of the assistance that we're working with the National Park Service team for is to help kind of garner that volunteer base to help move this forward, but also sustain maintenance and all that moving forward. But I know it's out there, and I guess I was surprised to have so many conversations about people who are really passionate about the rail trail and yet haven't made a formal engagement, I guess.
I guess I could say that I'm surprised by, I honestly don't know if it's a surprise or just it's kind of nice to see how in communities like local artists just really make a lot of things happen. Like, you know, that things that you consider like underground and people not really knowing much about, like the talent and the passion that exists within these small towns and that artists have and what they bring to the table. Like, it's amazing to see how even helping set up some small initial steps towards something larger, like an event, or just giving people that space, like the magic that, you know, the folks who are already there can create when they're given some sort of platform. Like, it's amazing. Like, there's a place in Bridgeport called Knowlton Walls that if you're ever in Bridgeport, go check it out. It's got a bunch of art everywhere, like through up and under buildings. They've got like a makeshift iceberg outside. It's amazing. And it's all like the artist community who's doing that there. And then there's other artists doing things along other parts of the waterfront. So again, like, we all know artists are amazing, but I think it's just like how super tapped in like they are to what's going on right now, like how to engage people, you know. They, you know, a lot of times they have the answers already. So pleasant surprise.
So true, Raul. I see Jennifer put that in the chat.
Yeah,
too.
exactly that. Yeah.
So those are all the questions that I had for you. I'm just gonna hold this space for a minute and see if anyone else would like to bring any other questions forth. But I also want to extend so much gratitude to all of our presenters, Neva, Raul, and Bethany. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Thank you, all of you, for, even though we can't see everyone's faces, I know your presence is here. So thank you for being here and to listen. And also thank you to Jennifer for holding space for us tonight, and to the Buzz Engine folks who were dealing with the technical things behind the scenes. Thank you. So thank you everyone again for joining. I hope you had a great summit today.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Valerie Fernandez. I got involved in sustainable transportation and environmental justice as a transport rifle ambassador. Now I'm currently a sophomore at the Connecticut State University, studying criminology and sociology to become a lawyer. I want to thank you all for attending to our summit. I am so glad that you were able to join us today in this stimulating discussion. Please let's stay in touch. You can sign up for a newsletter, you can attend to our events, and even sponsor or work for us if interested. We hope to see you around.